Time to talk taxes right now, and if you're going to talk taxes, I don't think there's a better person in the nation to talk to than the man sitting to my left, physically, not politically. The man sitting to my left, Grover Norquist. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome aboard. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Good to be with you.
Glad to have you on here. We're going to get to what you're going to be talking about today in just a minute, but let's talk a little bit about you and a little bit about your path so far.
Okay.
Your name has been synonymous with wanting to cut, if not eliminate, many, many taxes over the years. How did you end up in this position where this has become your thing?
When I got out of college, I went down and became the number 2 guy at the National Taxpayers Union, which at that point was the only taxpayer group, national taxpayer group. It was exactly the time that Proposition 13 in California was going, the tax revolt there, and then Reagan's tax cuts came in. So I was the number 2 guy. Within a month of my getting there, the number 1 guy decided to go do something else, so I got to run it in the middle of exactly the most interesting time in decades for the modern conservative movement. So I did get a chance to meet all the people who were working at different levels to reduce taxes, state, local, nationally. Went off to business school, came back, and then when Reagan wanted somebody to run Americans for Tax Reform, a group that the White House put together to pass the 1986 tax reform bill, which was a significant rate cut, topped the two income tax rates for individuals after that passed were 15 and 28. We've lost a lot of ground since then. It was only 2 rates, not a whole bunch, 15 and 28. And the reason we lost them was that Bush gave them away. He didn't understand the importance of keeping his pledge. I developed the pledge, the no tax increase pledge, during that fight.
We could talk about that pledge a little. I've always had loved the spirit of the pledge, but the actual playing out of the pledge, I could never get past the idea of proxying your vote away. The pledge is basically saying no matter what, no matter what happens back at home. But
there isn't a city in this town that doesn't spend too much. There isn't a state in this country that
completely
doesn't
agree.
spend too much.
Completely
and the country
agree.
spends too much. There's never an excuse for raising
But
taxes. We get along with the government at 3% of GDP for about a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
And
well, let's go back to 1986 for just a minute, because there's an important point of this, is that it takes time for tax reform to take hold on Main Street. And it's very easy to see the sky falling in the short term, knowing where it could be in the long term. How do we fight that battle to say, stick it out, ride it out, it's going to be okay?
I think you have to understand what tax increases do to the economy, how they change everybody's decision-making. When taxes are too high, among other things, work becomes less rewarding. Taking Saturday off becomes less expensive because you're not giving up 100% of your income. You're giving up a fraction of your income because the government was going to take it if you decided to work an extra day. So, and then you just compare the states that have no income taxes, the 8 states with no personal income taxes at the state level, compared to those that do. And people move to states with 0 or very low income taxes. They leave states with higher income taxes. And it's just historically, people move from one country to another over taxes.
Really putting the ball on a tee for me right there with the moving 2 states that have the lower income taxes. We'll get around to that in just a second. How has this battle changed over the years?
Well, I think, first of all, the Republicans have become successful enough to have control of about 20 to 30 states. Sometimes they lose the governorships, but for state legislatures, they have between 20 and 30 state legislators, which wasn't true for the previous 60 years. And as a result, you're allowed to see North Carolina, which really pioneered how do you phase the income tax down to 0 without, given that there are recessions and there are growth periods, and how do you make this work? And they tried a few things that didn't work at first, and now they're the model that a dozen states are following to phase their income tax down to 0 over time as revenue comes in beyond what the natural growth of the number of people plus inflation, population growth plus inflation, that at that point, if the government grows that at that rate, it's not getting any bigger or any smaller. It's not getting any bigger. Right now, governments have been creeping up. If you stop that government creep up and take the taxes that flowed from that and eliminate them, cut the income tax from 7 to 6.8, from 6.8 to 6.5 on the way down, you now have North Carolina within 6 years of no income tax, personal, And in 4 years, there will be no corporate income tax. That's already the law of the land. New Hampshire is 2 years away from being a no income tax state. Our friends in Mississippi, the House itself voted about 100 to 14 to phase the income tax down over 12 years. The Senate said, let's go slower, so they're doing it part way, but they'll come back and get the rest of it. Our friends in Kentucky's on a 12-year phase down to zero. Iowa's on a 4-year phase down from a top rate of 6.8 down to 3.9.
Okay.
Then they're going to zero. So they're just a whole series of states that as revenue comes in from growth, instead of spending it, they cut the income tax.
There are a couple of different battles within this front. One of them is tightening the belt on a statewide level, not spending things on things we don't have to spend things on. But there's a little bit of give and take there. Is people have to work with other people. There's compromise, and in a good compromise, everybody's unhappy. But there's also, when you lean into those compromises, you make up revenue from another spot. Where does revenue get made up?
Okay, I'm not in favor of shifting. You tried this.
No,
in Louisiana.
I know. I'm asking you to walk the path with me because just going from this level of revenue for the state and then dropping it it's not going to work here in Louisiana.
Okay, Louisiana tried what several states have tried, which is just taking the income tax, reducing it, moving it to the sales tax. Bobby Jindal put that forward.
Which is bad. It's regressive. It's bad for poor people.
I was in the slow growth is bad for poor people too.
Well played, yes, sir.
So that's no job is the worst thing.
Exactly.
And what his staff put together was take the income tax, move most of it to sales tax, and not reduce spending at all, not reduce taxes at all. And I was in Louisiana within 10 days of when it was first put forward, and it was a dead cat bounce. It just went nowhere. Right. The states that are doing this right are saying government spending has grown. As the economy grows, it gets more in tax revenue. We're going to limit its growth, and as a result, to have it be a smaller percentage of people's lives. But in North Carolina, they have a lot more money in the government than they did 12 years ago when they started. It's just a smaller percentage of people's lives because their economy has grown more, and you get to keep the tax revenue they were going to overspend with.
We're talking with Grover Norquist, the head of Americans for Tax Reform. Okay, let's bring it around to what you're doing here today.
Sure.
What's on your docket? What are you really keying in on?
I think Louisiana they passed a bill which has a soft trigger, which would start to bring some of the income tax rates down. The trigger is not as robust as it needs to be. Certainly the spending restraint. The present Democratic governor, I know he pretends to be moderate and everything, but he's been a tax and spend governor. And compared to the Republican-led states, both in the South but throughout the Midwest as well, government's growing too fast. It's too heavy, and there's very little reform going on. In other states, you're looking at, well, you did with Bobby Jindal, do that massive reform within the city of New Orleans where everything went to a charter school in effect. That was dramatic improvement in how you have
the recovery school district. Taking it back to post-Katrina.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That was taking it, something that was a mess, and saying this is our opportunity to restart it. If you were starting from zero, how would you run the schools? Would you really have every school unionized with the same rules and everything with no ability to do things? No, you wouldn't do that. It's what many states do. And we're now seeing, in addition to the lower rates on the income tax phasing down towards zero, also educational savings accounts, parental control of state resources. The state's going to give you $7,000 to go to school, Iowa, but they give it to the school nearest you. You don't see it. It goes to the school near you.
Okay.
Even if it's not the one you want.
Yeah.
Now it goes for you to say, I want it to go to maybe the school I'm happy with, state, keep it there. Maybe I want to go down the road to a different public school. Maybe I want to go to a charter school, a private school, a parochial school, or homeschool. You choose, the parents. And that's something that has been dramatic. 10 states have passed education savings accounts now. Texas is about to. Arkansas, I think, just did.
Yesterday, in fact, we talked with Dr. Aaron Bendley in our last segment about just that. And education savings accounts are one that always intrigues me because I have 3 kids in Catholic school, but also baffles me because they seem so common sense. Who are we here to serve? We're here to serve the next generation. Who's the next generation? The kids. Well, why doesn't the money follow the kids? Why is the money? Yeah,
because
we got
teachers
more to
union.
cover. Yeah. No, I know. We got a lot more to cover with just a couple minutes to go into the segment. We're talking with Grover Norquist about tax reform in Louisiana and where we can actually get and how quickly we can get there. Every day that goes by, Grover, we fall another step behind. Florida, Texas, Tennessee. You mentioned North Carolina, and I hate saying it out loud. Okay, backstory here. Us in Mississippi.
Yep.
I mean, we're always battling for 49th, and we take bragging rights on 49th. And if we're not 49th, yeah, I know. Every day that goes by, that gap widens.
Yeah.
How do we narrow it? How can we narrow it quickly?
You probably need
2
a different
minutes.
governor.
That's going to happen.
Yeah,
I mean,
understand with term limits.
Yeah.
But a governor who looks around at the 50 states and says what's working. And what's working is school choice, parental control, and lower income taxes. All of those things, when you go state by state, it's working in north. Some people go, oh, the reason why no income tax states work is they have the sun, right? Texas, Florida.
So do we.
South Dakota doesn't have any sun.
Fair enough.
Alaska doesn't have any sun. So the North Dakota is phasing their income tax down to zero in order to keep people from leaving after they graduate from school.
I mean, good luck. You're still going to be North Dakota at the end of the day. That's, I mean, no offense, but that's cold.
They've gotten some of those guys have gotten used to it.
Yeah.
But they will move if there aren't jobs.
No, you're 100% right. And at the end of the day, if you want a tax base, you have to have jobs because people are going to go where they can get jobs. And if you empty out the top, all you're going to be left with is the bottom.
That's what's
1
happening
minute.
to California and New York.
He is Grover Norquist. Okay, how far away are we from this happening here in Louisiana? Like, it just
I think if you had a
beyond the
pro-growth governor,
beyond the
governor, I think you could begin the process of phasing it down. So as revenue comes in, you just say it doesn't all go to more spending. Half of it goes to lower taxes.
I tell you what, Alondra, we're going to go over by a full minute here.
Okay.
So, but let me re-ask the question.
Sure.
If North Carolina's phasing out, Mississippi's phasing out, they have mapped this out. If we were to start today, if we were to start, say, January 1 of 2024, because, a new governor will be sworn in shortly after that, if we were to start there, what are we looking at in terms of, would this be a 5-year plan, a decade plan? Would it take even longer because of the way Louisiana has traditionally dragged its feet? What are we looking at?
If you had a robust move in Mississippi, they set out a 10 to 12-year phase down, which was aggressive, but not the most aggressive in the country. In North Carolina, because they started and stopped, it'll probably over time take them 17 years to have finally gone to zero. But again, they didn't. You start with the knowledge they didn't have, so
Fair.
one could move a little faster
Sure,
than
fair.
North Carolina did. I think you're looking at a 10-year phase out in Iowa.
Okay.
And there's 10 years in Kentucky.
So about a decade is what
Yeah.
we're probably looking at if we can be on pace with other states. He is Grover Norquist. You got a busy day in front of you. Man, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you being here.
No, thanks
and
for the
appreciate your
opportunity.
insight and conversation. Thank you so much.
You got it.
We are